You've been called the farm-to-table pioneer. What do you think you recognized a little earlier on than most?
I got to give credit to Hugo, my co-founder, Hugo Matheson.
So you were once the line chef.
Yeah, I was his line chef.
cook
I was
for it,
his line cook in Boulder. So
Right.
he worked at the River Cafe in London. And to be fair to the farm-to-table movement, it really started in the 70s. It started with the River Cafe in London, Chez Panisse in California, and a few other restaurants in USA and Europe. And but it didn't really take off. And what happened in 2004 was this. First of all, you got Hugo, who says, we got to work with local farmers. That's going to make all the difference in the quality of our food. We had this completely naive vision that we want to cook 4 nights a week, 40 people a night, would change the menu every day. And, it was like this beautiful vision. But within 3 months, we were literally serving 3,000 people a week. We were open 7 days a week, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And we're like, what have we gotten ourselves into? But it really hit a nerve. Farm to table became a thing. But I think one of the reasons why it took off, whereas it didn't take off in the 70s, was the internet started to happen. So what I noticed back in 2004, as crazy as it sounds, is almost no one was on email. It was bizarre. Like I'd already built and sold an internet company, and it was now 5 years later, and I'm talking to farmers that still use phone and paper chits, and I was like, come on, like if you can just email us your order, we don't have to worry about us picking up the phone. We can respond. Texting wasn't a thing back then, so email was the tool. And all of a sudden, our farmers went from having this complete disconnect between us and the restaurant to having a constant flow of communication. And this happened all around the same time, that these farmers could now tell us what they were growing, what they actually were harvesting, because that actually changed on a daily basis. And we had this thing with, you can deliver really anything by 4 a.m, but if you can email us, we'll be able to plan the menu and we actually get because the other thing about farm to table, you want it to be fresh. So the last thing you want to do is get a delivery and then put it on the menu 3 days later.
Right.
You want to do it that day. And all of a sudden, the farm to table movement could exist. I've always been amazed at the synchronicity of things, but it also takes like this sort of entrepreneurial mindset. Like, no, I think we got to be able to solve this. Seems silly. And that was certainly silly. Like, email has existed for a long time. It had existed my entire life.
Yeah.
And these people had never heard of it. And I was like, okay, we can fix it with email. And nowadays, of course, everyone's much more sophisticated than that. And it's great. We get to the best product from the best farmers, and we can move things around like supply chain. And that just wasn't a thing 20 years ago.
How do you view the processing of foods?
Well, I'm not a fan of processed food. I think that there are many ways to feed people, and I do believe in feeding people. Let's not kid ourselves. People go hungry, and we need to figure that out. But one of the things I've worked on is, how do you get people to cook again? And I was like, okay, how can I solve for the problem, which is making sure people can afford it, making sure people can eat and enjoy the flavor of it. So I do believe that processed food solves this problem in many ways by making it so that nothing goes off. That, okay, it's relatively cheap to go to McDonald's. It's not actually that cheap though. If you do a family of 4, you go to McDonald's, it's $30, $35. It's not that cheap. And so what one of the ways I was tackling it was I worked with some friends of mine who owned all these billboards around the country, and I put like billboards up of how to roast a chicken, 400 degrees, 1 hour, salt and pepper, $6, and a beautiful picture of a roast chicken. And so that went across the whole country. And then broccoli, a little bit of salt, olive oil, $3.50, 1 hour, done. $2. And so it would be the price plus the simplest recipes ever. Carrots, salt, 400 degrees, 1 hour, $2. And so for $10, because these billboards would be kind of near each other, you could feed a family of 4 using food you get from the grocery store. You can get in any grocery store, not like Whole Foods or whatever. And I think that there are better ways to solve the problem than processed food. But I also want to be thoughtful that there's a lot of people still have to kind of get into cooking.
Explain the thinking with Square Roots behind cultivating 3 acres of plants in this 8-foot by 40-foot storage container.
Actually, it's more than that. So Square Roots is what's what we call farming as a service, where we grow food locally if people desire, or we might do for research and development. And we have this incredibly cool group of young entrepreneurs that work with us. So I wouldn't call them entrepreneurs; they're more like technology farmers, but so that's entrepreneurial in a sense, where they want to work in farming, but they also want to have high-skilled jobs. And we work with amazing, governments or foundations or major food suppliers, and we'll grow food for them. Sometimes we'll grow basil or we'll grow arugula, but sometimes we grow things that are technically very difficult. So it's more truly on the cutting edge of science, without using GMO or anything like that, but just like, okay, how do we grow using less light? How do we grow this particular crop with different techniques so that if it works, we can then scale it out to the world. But back to your point around how many acres, our farm in Michigan, which is 10 zones, 10 shipping containers, if we just grew basil, grows more basil than the equivalent of 500 acres of land in Michigan.
Wow.
I go from, and this is less than an acre.
Yeah.
We'll grow more food than 500 acres. It's so incredible what's possible.
And how do you do it?
It's all vertical.
Yeah.
But it's also, you do it through plant science. So a typical grow season for basil in Michigan is once a year, 70 days. We actually replicate the climate of Genoa, Italy. So the best season of Genoa, June of 1997, because it's like that's when the moisture was right, the flavor was better. So we're going to replicate that and refine it. And so we can get it down to a 28-day grow cycle. So you're able to grow the basil in a quicker amount of time. It tastes better. It is better. And you get 13 seasons instead of 1. And then you grow it vertically. And do the maths. 1 acre goes to 500 acres.
And look, obviously, innovation's hard. Way better than me on the square roots front. There were, staff layoffs and location closings this past summer. What have you found to be the biggest challenges with making it a success?
Yeah, Square Roots is a great company, and I've gone through ups and downs with all companies.
Right.
And last year was sort of a reckoning in the whole indoor farming industry, which had a lot to do with the capital markets. So the capital markets said, the Fed said, we're going to make it more expensive to get money. They raised rates very quickly.
Right.
And the challenge with indoor farming is it requires a lot of capital to invest. And so it was just a very, very loud signal from the capital markets to say, if you're thinking of building more factories or more, in our case, more plant farms, it's going to be a lot more expensive. I am always amazed at how hard these decisions are. We're obviously affecting people's jobs, but also we have this vision of getting real food to everyone. We really wanted to be on that path, and it's really humbling to have to make those kind of hard decisions. And now I look back and I'm like, well, it's the right decision. Company's doing well.
What do you think has to happen long term to make it a success?
Well, I think in our case, at Square Roots, we are focused on solving very difficult technical problems. Like if we're just growing basil, we're feeding rich people in America. Not that exciting. Okay, but we're trying to figure out how to grow food. It might be lettuces or might be tomatoes or something, but we're trying to do it with 1/20th of the light, and that uses 1/20th of the energy. Oh, that's a game changer. So I get excited about that. And then on that sort of directional path, we're helping the world figure out how to grow indoors. We will have to, unfortunately, because of climate change, have to grow indoors a lot in the future. Not everywhere, but a lot. And in some parts of the world, maybe it might be most of their product. And or most of their food, and if they have to use that much energy, we run out of energy. So it's really, if you kind of do the math, we have to solve this problem. So I'm quite excited for Square Roots to play a role in there.